Okay. Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. We'll call today's County Service meeting to order. We'll go around the room. Chris Rogers, County Board.
Claire Duda, County Board.
Randy Woodard, Douglas County Youth Center.
Brad Alexander, Douglas County Youth Center.
Mark McClure, Douglas County Youth Center.
Oswald Martin, RED Coordinator.
Mike Boyle, Altamon's bodyguard. No, I'm
Never sleep.
Mark Kraft, Douglas County Board. I hope you all see what we put up. PJ Board, County Board.
Shelley Salter, JDAG Coordinator for Douglas County.
Janae Pancook, Operation Youth Success.
Sean Coonfer, Juvenile Assessment Center.
Pam Murphy, County Administration.
Kim Bolo, Douglas County Clerk's Office.
Anybody on the wall, if you want to say something.
Dave Collins, DCYC.
John Mack, Douglas County Youth Center.
Okay. All right. So, just let me. This will be the last meeting of the year. Assuming appointments go for the board to begin the next year, we'll probably be looking for a new date instead of the first of the year. For the last couple of months, that's just timed out wrong. Some of you all go to the board, particularly DCYC, you present at the board, and instead of having to repeat that here. So the time will be changed. I'll be trying to, if everything lines up right next year, the new meet date will probably try to be on the third Tuesday and probably be more specific in regards to items like the one we'll talk about today that pop his head up to dig more deeply. So just note that's kind of how things will evolve to some degree and what I'm thinking. So with hopefully a regular to be with juvenile probation for Mary to kind of get an update on where they're going with the implementation of 670 or what's now statute 42-251, which is the placement law. She's supposed to be coming today, and I think she's supposed to be bringing Judge Brown. So the hope is to have a regular more discussion about that and have that on a regular piece. So with that, we'll start with the JAG. For any JAG, Jada, I know we'll ask you anything in routine and get into the specifics. So, John.
All right. This group is quite used to a double-page handout from the Juvenile Assessment Center that has numerous data points. I've been working with Commissioner Rogers for a couple of months on some suggestions he has of paring that down and putting that into a more pictorial representation. So have a first stab at that here today. So keeping in line with the comparison, so you can kind of see where we are trend-wise, this first page has the big buckets of youth served at the Juvenile Assessment Center, and I just want to up front say these are for delinquency matters. These are not for truancy only. This is for the delinquent youth who are referred to the Juvenile Assessment Center because they have charges that have gone to the county attorney's office. And these are youth that are not already filed in court, so they come our way for assessment. So that's these youth on page 1, delinquency matters. You can see what the trend was for 2017, 2018, and then our current quarter. And we're on trend on all of those numbers. Page 2 and 3 are a couple of those data points broken out by race. And so page 2 are the youth who are referred for assessment, all those youth coming in. And then page 3 are the youth who are placed on diversion. And then the fourth page is the page I'd like to spend a little bit of time on. I did give an update in August regarding the trends that we're seeing, higher behavioral health needs, higher family needs for these youth, and I really wanna highlight that here, so what to us is most important are the needs of the kids that are coming our way. And so if we could just briefly go through these, in 2018, the behavioral health screens, that's a computer-based screen that the youth is hopping on and they're saying yes, no questions. A note on that so you see here, this is the percentage of our kids coming our way who are scoring possible or present in these areas. On suicide, that's on the screen itself. If you also take into account the personal interview we do with all of the youth, we're seeing 20% of all of the youth coming our way who have recent suicide ideation or attempts. We take that really seriously. We're working really closely with behavioral health providers and coalitions in the community on how to handle that. So it's an indication that kids need to be asked those questions intentionally in order to intervene at the earliest possible point and give them what they need.
Could I ask
Sure.
you, if it's 20%, why does it say 11.31?
So the chart itself is just the computer-based screening they do, and the 20% accounts also for the personal interview. So we're not sure why, there's a difference, but kids are not affirmatively choosing that always on the yes-no computer question, but when we ask them one-on-one, have you felt like in your life, they'll answer yes, when sometimes they're answering no on the computer-based screening. Not sure why, but thanks for asking that, that's a really important part. So then, when you move to the second chart on that page, this is the personal interview that happens with each one of the kids who comes to the Juvenile Assessment Center. We have an interview with the parent or guardian separate, and the youth in a one-on-one. And these are the moderate and high risk areas. So you can see here a point of the first 13 years of the JAC's existence, the three highest areas of risk were education, leisure, rec, and peers. And what has surpassed those now in one of the highest is personality. So we're seeing a great increase in personality risk. And we're also seeing in the past 3 years an increase from 10% to 20% in the area of family risk. And so we're watching that trend and also trying to work with our community providers to ensure that there's programs that can meet those needs in the community.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, could you explain what personality is?
Sure, personality,
I don't
and
have one, that's why.
and
Sorry.
You good?
it is a structured interview, and so it's not just my idea of whether or not a person has those issues, but there's a structured questions that are asked that refer back to areas of poor frustration tolerance, verbal aggression, physical aggression. There's very specific areas, and if a youth answers affirmatively to, things like, yes, I got in 3 physical altercations last year. So there's a very strict scoring matrix around that, and so that's what we're seeing there.
Thank you, that really helps. I'm sorry to be so, I don't mean to be loud about this.
No, this is
This
why
is
I
really-
asked her to break these out, so you can see and you can ask.
We get really used to just saying the score,
Yeah,
and it's so helpful when someone asks for details because that allows us to really give you a more accurate picture of the kids. So
thank you,
thank you.
it's very helpful.
And then, I wanted to just make a quick point about priors, the very first one there. Again, it's a strict scoring matrix. Kids can only be scored in priors if they have a prior conviction, or in other words, they've been on probation. And so for kids who actually have law violations, we have about 20% of our kids who have previous law violations. They simply don't score in that area because it has to be a full-blown probation for them to have a score in that area. It's another one of the things we're trying to track, how many of our kids are coming back, are they scoring higher or lower the next time they come, that kind of thing. The very last chart there is just a snapshot of charges, and those are some collapsed charges, so there's lots of different charge types that go into those, but anything around shoplifting there is the highest charge we're seeing. They go down from there. These account for 80% of all the charges we see at the Juvenile Assessment Center. So there are charges outside of this that just don't raise to the level of being in the top 10. For instance, arson. We've seen about 10 arson cases this year. That's not enough to raise to the top 10. And there's another note about charges. What was that? Oh, a youth can have more than one charge, and in fact often does have more than one charge. And so these numbers can't be added up to equal the number of kids. So often it'll be a marijuana and paraphernalia, and so you'll see that in two categories there. And just another couple of updates. Did anyone have any other questions on the charge graphs? Helpful?
Sean, I have one, I noticed you did a great job in outlining the race up front here. Do you do the same here? Is it broken down at some point down there on the racial? Like, in other words, are there certain racial categories in terms of high level of this, shoplifting, whatever like that?
We can do any of that.
Okay, you do have.
We can do any of that.
Okay,
So
okay.
those are the kinds of examples of things we can do and do in relation to if we're seeing trends, so
Okay.
where's the need?
Okay, got you.
So
Good.
thanks for that question.
Appreciate that.
Along that line too, one of the things I think I mentioned at the August Child and Youth Committee meeting is we've done a lot of work in our case management system to enhance how we are capturing information. One thing we have discovered, if you'll look at the race categories, race is system reported at time of arrest, so the arresting officer says, I think you are this, and puts it on the, and when the youth comes here to us, it's self-report. So there's we were able to lock down our system so that we have race at time of arrest and race when youth come. And so far in our first quarter of data capture, we're seeing about a 75% match.
Wow.
Which means a 25% error in, so when we're looking at race across the system points, we need to be very conscientious about arrest, and once a youth is in the system, if it's self-reported, that there could be a difference. So that could really affect some of the work you're doing
Right.
as well, so.
Excuse me, I don't understand that. Are you saying that the race that they get at the time of arrest can be different from later? I mean, are you
Yes.
talking children who are seen as white and then they're African American or vice versa?
And usually it's not that very,
Correct.
Hispanic
Right.
The
is often,
Hispanic is
and often mixed,
Yeah.
African American, mixed at the time of report, that kind of thing, but 25% is pretty high. So
Yeah.
it's enough for us to say, okay, we really need to be conscientious of not saying apples and oranges, you know,
Right.
when we're looking at the whole system.
Very helpful, thank you.
Then, so the right track, we've done some things there, so we'll have some more interesting data there and some really helpful, I think, helpful data coming out of that. And the other thing to say, again, this was delinquency data, just a quick update on the truancy data. There have been 130 truancy referrals coming from schools so far this year to the county attorney's office. We've reviewed 109 of those cases, and only 11 so far have been diversion eligible. So out of 109, only 11 have been diversion eligible, and that is because most of those kids are already court involved, already on probation, or a few other matters. So just to kind of, when we give those big truancy numbers, it's often misleading, and we've had some pretty detailed talks about that regarding you guys' capstone. So I'll try and, oh, did you, I'm sorry.
She has a question.
She does.
I do actually have two. When you say this year, you mean this school year, right?
This school year.
130 were full this school year, not
Yes,
the
thank
full
you,
year.
thank
And
you.
then can you break down diverted from formal system by race? Because we have like the youth serve and referred for assessments completed, placed at diversion. Do you have the same data for success?
We would
by
have
race?
it, so what this is from the data set we've been bringing, the data that's been available and doing that graphically. So without going in and doing a lot of more analysis, we're just starting to do this process here, so.
Is it possible to do what she's asking for?
It's possible, yeah, yeah. It's just something we have not had readily available, so.
Would it be useful?
I think so,
Yes.
because if you could see,
Referral come from
I'm sorry.
Race and ethnicity, say for example, you would see Sudanese kids are failing out in a certain area, maybe we need a program that's more culturally responsive or something. I don't know what it would say, but I'd be curious to see how kids even fail out of any of the things that we do, because then you might see cultural responsivity that we're missing.
Is it,
That's,
can
yeah,
you do
that's,
that then?
right, that's
Great.
perfect point.
So the referrals, are they actually coming from the school or are they being routed? How is it that, we're,
What referral are you referring to?
I'm talking about those youth that are on probation that you just mentioned, that were referred to the JAC, that you were.
Right, so they're not referred, just to be clear on truancy, we work in tandem with the county attorney. So they're referred to the county attorney.
Thank you.
And we simply help with that process so that we can have the data available to have the scan of all of the truancy kids.
So the county attorney would stop the probation youth from being referred?
Exactly. So then at time of review, all of those youth then are sent that way. So then we end up with
With just
the 11
the
divertible
residual
kids.
that we can work with?
Right,
Thank
exactly.
you very much.
Okay, so, now Shelley brought up my point, but to your point, Mike, that REGO data, and when I say REGO, I mean race, ethnicity, gender, geography, and offense. That's relevant to the diverted from the system piece, and I had that note too, because it just gives you stuff to ask a question, because based on that data, the question I would like to ask for that, if there's a high amount of kids of color not being referred out of, then the question is just to ask why and see what's what. So that's what the relevant of that is. But I mean, to the board, I had to talk with Sean to start breaking this down to let you soak it up a little better, because I don't know if you remember the presentation that was given by the group that's doing a survey down here. And they're probably going to come back soon with some recommendations. So we need to be ready to soak up whatever that recommendation is, because my gut tells me there's going to be an ask out of there. I don't know what, but this gets us up to speed for that. So we'll keep working on it. And if you all got some feedback on how to break this out more, let me know so we can talk through it. With that, we'll go to J-Dot. Shelley?
I don't have a lot for today. I have two handouts that you have. One is just our regular third quarter data memo that we do, and I think, I'm not gonna read through the whole thing. Our average daily population in the third quarter of kids on juvenile charges is 45. We would still have 25 to 30 kids that are on adult charges to add to that. So this is just our normal data memo. And then I brought this as just an FYI. This is how we report at the state JDI Collaborative every quarter. So I brought it here so if you wanted to look at that, you can see what we do there. And basically, I think right now we're just kind of wrapping up the year in our old work plans. Most of our work is happening through our case processing committee, really trying to find a process to expedite youth that are detained, to be able to identify re-adjudicated youth from probation youth and what needs these kids have, and figuring out a process to keep all of the parties of the probation officer and providers working with kids and families, communicating so we know what we need to move youth into services. So that expediting process is really important right now. Our data committee, we're all kind of working on the same thing right now, and it feels kind of good because everybody's focused on the same kids. Data committees, same thing, asking for data split by pre-adjudicated kids and kids on probation. Those are the kids we can impact, so we can look at two groups, a little smaller. Feels like a big problem. I say this often, there's about 76,000 kids in this county, but we're not talking about all of them. We're talking in this quarter about 45 kids that we would like to see into services and not detained. So kind of making it a little smaller so we can wrap our brains around it a little easier. And again, racial and ethnic disparities throughout everything we do, any process we make, how is it impacting our families of color. And then next year will be hopefully our year of alternatives to detention. We have the data now, we have the case processing committee looking at court hearings and what's happening at each. So how does our alternative committee help us figure out what do we need for these youth who are losing placement and maybe need somewhere to be for a little while we reassess to figure out what we need, what service could we put in family homes to send kids home. So I think that's just kind of our update for the end of the year, where we're going next year. This year we had LB 1112 which is a change in our detention statute that I know caused a lot of conversation across the state because we were no longer allowed to definitively detain youth who are a risk to themselves. And we've been asked to make some kind of a report telling you the difference between June 30th and July 1st. As a former caseworker, that doesn't feel comfortable to me to armchair quarterback someone's decision. What I can tell you is that in this county, the probation intake officers are doing amazing jobs in planning for youth safety, being able to send them home or with family, get them the services they need as often as they can. And our committees are working on those kids that are left to figure out where can they go so they can get the service so they can move into their life and go into adulthood life like the other kids.
This is gonna come to the board agenda, maybe the 17th. So, but this is, if you eat early deal, soak it up.
Thank you.
What's the point on what that is? Oh, also just note, so if you look at the first page of this, that data memo she gave you, you see the 45.5?
Yeah.
So she's gonna start breaking this down and pointing this out at the board meeting because of discussion. This is what's in on juvenile. So basically it's safe to say that 45.5 for the quarter, or because they're in on juvenile charges, they should be out depending on where you get services. So the point is try to make that distinction when you hear the 75, the 70, the 77 number. This is what the juvenile population is, 45. So, and I'm pulling that out because this has been framed as if, you know, it's 70, 75 kids. It's really about, if that's the case, it's probably about 30, 20 kids on adult charges, somewhere in there. This is the juvenile number, which you had services, you'd be out. So that's how she's gonna start doing it, so you know the rationale.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
On, I guess I never asked permission. Sorry. On the third quarter results down here, where it says, what are the reasons youth were detained? It says 37% for technical reasons. Is that because something got happened in juvenile court, or something got delayed, or what is a technical reason?
There are a couple that it could be, but I do appreciate pointing this out because it's been a while since we've seen, our technical reasons are exactly that. Something that a youth did that violated their terms of probation, the program that they're in, if they had an electronic monitor, cut it off, if they're, they might be detained for that. So yes, they're not new offenses, it's some technical violation of their terms right now. Does that help?
It does, and you know, it's something that I've said at the board a lot of times, that I really am very concerned about that our system of justice, youth justice, is imposing a set of behavior, sets of behavior on young people that don't have that kind of lifestyle. And so we put monitors on them, they don't have anything like that in their life. We put probation on them, which they're not used to responding to any adult for anything. And then they violate it, and then this whole spiral starts, and pretty soon they're, you know, we go over 18th Street in 5 years, and there they are, you know. I'm really worried that we're using a system of justice that is not appropriate, and it's not you. But I mean, this whole thing about probation, I don't know, I mean, I'm kind of disorganized myself, you know, the other night I was supposed to be at a dinner and I blew it off, you know, I just totally forgot about it. So anyway, I'm just saying that these young people, I'm worried, very much worried, that here they are, if you drive down 24th, you drive down 24th, you go down 84th, and where? And you see kids doing things, they're hanging out, coming home from school, or if they're in school, and they're just not focused on anything other than themselves and their friends. Suddenly we say, okay, now you're on probation, and you have to show up and do these things, you can't talk to these people, you can't do those things. I think we're setting them up for, frankly, white solutions to racial people that are not white are being asked to do these things. I don't know, I suppose my grandkids would behave, I don't know, I've got 18 of them. But I think if they were, a bracelet was put on their leg, I don't think anybody would take it off. But they're at a different level, I mean, they've been, you know, something's happened to them, and so I'm worried that we're putting these kids through some things that they are doomed for failure.
I think that you kind of just explained exactly why things like JDAI started in America. It's something everyone's grappling with. I think that's exactly the case. We don't want to see kids being violated for things that are technical. And I think probably probation and the bench would give you better answers.
And
But
if you hold that thought,
probation's,
they're
sanctions
coming
and
up a
incentives
couple of
won't
deals,
do
so
much for that.
I'm sure they're taking
Thank
notes
you.
and they can expound on that if they want to.
Thanks.
Any JDOT
But
questions?
yes,
Okay. Janae, OIS?
I don't wanna talk about reimagining juvenile justice, so I'll leave that to you. No, you're the trainer, you're the expert. Community-based aid will come to the OIS steering committee on, December 5th at 8:00 a.m. in the Jesse Lowe Conference Room. That's an open meeting, so please be there if you would like to, and that's I think it's about $1.6 million with applications from various entities were due the end of October. And, each of the county commissioners had appointed somebody for an advisory committee that will review all those applications and make recommendations to the steering committee, and the steering committee will hear those then, at that meeting on the 5th. Yeah,
Yeah, if it went 1:00, 9.
8 a.m.
Okay.
in Jesse Lowe,
5th of
December, yeah. Sorry about that, yeah, 5th of December, which is like already here almost, it's crazy. The OIS data analyst, Catherine Rivier, resigned. Her last day was last Friday, and currently OIS will not be advertising that position right now. We're gonna see how some other positions fall out here with the deputy county administrator and how we can best support that role moving forward, so we'll be holding off on advertising that position. We have restorative practices task force continues to meet, and working with Omaha Public Schools on doing some restorative practice work was suspended. And youth that were out of the school, and hopefully we can repair some of the harm between the teacher, administrator, parent, and youth and stuff to help them be successful as they come back to school after being expelled or suspended. So that's some work we're trying to move forward there. And then the Juvenile Justice Council, there's two age groups of those. Basically younger adults and then youth. And they continue to meet monthly. A lot of work groups send some information to them to get feedback. And we've had 2 meetings so far of a families council, which is composed of family members of youth that have been in touch with the Juvenile Justice Center, trying to inform, but then also solicit their feedback and engagement in system reform efforts.
So let me tie the string together for you. So she mentioned this restorative justice piece. There's no way to explain it to you, but basically the simplest way is that it's basically a method of dealing with the situation where the person who got offended confronts the person offending them. But the thing I want to tie to you is the OPS piece, because you mentioned the law talk with Lisa Utterback that you saw her presentation. I think I mentioned it here, but just to tie it together, there was a meeting with Kara Sturts from the JAG, the attorney there, who does the access to decide who comes in from school districts. Janae, Carla Dush, myself, Dr. Logan, and Lisa, to kind of talk about with them how we could work together for some of the stuff up front. The thing they expressed, which I assured her that we weren't asking, is that every time somebody comes to them, that people ask them to put to pay the tab for it. And I told her, no, we're not asking you to do that. We could possibly have the resource to do it. But the fact is to kind of get access to understand what's going on. So this is the first thing, to try to build relationship in this piece with them, to build some trust, get some understanding, and kind of go further. Because the conversation we had was trying to get them out of some of those things that are not education and get more upfront. So this is a part of that effort that they're working through. So that ties that string together for you, but also I've been talking to her, and I've been to a couple of those meetings trying to understand. I think you present in December, Sean?
Yes.
Okay.
But yes.
So they have this other meeting where they meet with all the specialists, and I think it ties to the social workers that they have in the school. It's been informative, but I just been sitting in those, and Lisa's let me sit in to kind of understand the services that are there and how this thing can tie together. So the hope is to try to tie this thing together more up front to get an understanding of that and build some trust with them. So you mentioned at a meeting that's what's being worked on to try to tie that together. And I just want to, now I heard this rumor, and I don't know, I'm gonna have to ask Sean to look into it. But I know for members on the board, they may not, we used to get $1.7 million in community aid money. community-based aid, went down to 1.4. They sent a memo exercising the option to be able to rescind money if you didn't use it based on history. So, you know, because they tightened the spend up and you can't carry it over past June 30th, we had been turning back probably about 150 to 200,000 a year. You know, just personally, I think we got to take blame for some of this rule as Douglas County, because a lot of the beef for that came out of here. And I had stated at several meetings, you don't use the money, they're going to take it. They took it. I don't think it's just us, but probably some other counties too. But I heard a rumor that they may be trying to eliminate community-based aid.
State?
Yeah, I just heard a rumor based on some pots of money and some other things that may be happening. So I'm gonna ask Sean to put his ear to the ground, because if that happens, you know, there's a whole nother deal. But I'm just putting that on the record. I heard that. I'm gonna have to verify it. I don't know what it is to it, but I heard they're trying to eliminate it and do something else, which, from what I heard, that will reduce the number probably from about the 1.4 to about 500,000. So
Can the county apply on its own, or does it have to go through the state?
it's gonna be gone, the way I heard it. So I think that's gonna be a hard task, but I just heard it. If you hear it, let me know. But that's just what I heard. I'll find out more at the NACO meeting in a couple of weeks. So, any questions for Jeanette? All right. Then let's go to item 2, which is probation update. So I mentioned before Mary walked in that we were going to try to change these meetings to a different time, because the first Tuesday conflicts with them also, for them being able to come because they have the meeting with the judges. So what I hoped in this setting on a more regular basis is to allow her to give you some update on what's going on with the new law, what they're doing for placement, the services they're offering up, what services they need, and how they're going at it. So this will give us a chance for some dialogue with it. So that's the gist of it. We go some other places they can go. So Mary, you often take it from there.
Thank you.
And just note, she brought the presiding juvenile court judge, Judge Brown, with, and he's been very, very good in working through this. So I'm sure he'll be added to this discussion.
Want me to start? I'll start. Okay. In terms of the placements, we have added some emergency foster care beds that probation pays for at intake and for probation kids. It's always a battle in Omaha and across the state to find people who want to be good foster parents, but we have had some success. We've had some educators in different parts of the community step up when they know children in their schools who have offered to be foster parents, so we're working with them, which is really a perfect opportunity to engage a child to come to school when the person at school is somebody that they feel is supportive to them. So that's been a pretty awesome thing that's happening one person at a time. The Omaha Home for Boys has received some grant money to open the crisis stabilization bed shelter. That'll be 8 beds. And have also looked at reopening some of the cottages that they had closed due to the fact that they've lost several pairs of house parents to other jobs. So again, back to the theme of people in Omaha all competing for the same labor force. They're working really hard to look at some different models to try and staff and work to get those beds reopened and we could get back to using them. A few years ago they did take primarily kids from other parts of the state, and now they are starting to take more of our Omaha kids. They also have an evening reporting center that's open till 9 o'clock, day reporting, substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment. They have therapists on staff, and that's been a game changer for a lot of our kids. When they start to have issues, they can get plugged in right away to people on site who will help them succeed in that program. We are also working heavily with the restorative justice component pieces here in town. This is a piece that juvenile justice probation, the state has been pushing for several years to kind of get back to what we used to do in the old days. When people got in trouble, they would go make an amends with the person that they got into trouble with. So we have a a really good program that's operating out of Heartland Family Services with a young lady who's doing some restorative justice groups in the school. We're looking at expanding that, and Heartland is also adding an in-home component. I have talked previously at a number of meetings how our biggest bang for our buck has been with in-home services. It gets challenging to find a program who's going to fix a kid if we aren't working intensely with the family. So we've continued to see some good success with those in-home family services, and I think we'll see some variations of that evolve in 2020 beyond the MST and the ecological services, but room for some other providers who might come in with a little bit different twist. We're also working with the Concord Center to restart that restorative justice component in the school. When we had that going a couple years ago, we saw some really good outcomes when kids would get in fights at school, and Concord would come in and do this mediation so the kids wouldn't get kicked out of school, and I'm not sure exactly what the reason was that it fell apart, but I'm pretty excited about the fact that everybody's willing to revisit that. Because sometimes that's all it takes is a sit-down meeting in a school as opposed to kids punching and getting cited and taken to jail. Concord is also continuing to do the victim offender mediation that we have started to refer a lot of kids to, so they can sit down and see some things from a different point of view, from the point of view of their victim. The research around that is really, really strong, that's been a success. I've also asked for them to incorporate some meaningful community service pieces into that, and the example I throw out most often is the kid who was cited for graffiti on a building, and the owner sat down with him in one of these conferences, and the owner ended up hiring the kid to work for him. So in my world, that's a perfect circle of the owner recognizing that this child had some pretty serious challenges at home, and he was just able to offer another stable adult to be there for a mentor for that kid. So those are the kinds of things we need. We also need to, or are going to, or looking at, or trying to figure out how to get around this law that says the county's supposed to pay for all the pre-adjudicated services, because we see some pretty high-level kids come in before their legal pieces have been settled, and we want to get services in the home right away, and we don't have a mechanism for that. So we're trying to see if there's a way we can go over, under, around, and through to facilitate that, as opposed to the kid coming in and looking at services, and then they have to go out of home to get those services before we've even tried anything in the home. So lots of pieces that we're continuing to work on.
Do you have questions for Mary before I go?
You know, I do.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, it's your world.
Mine are so basic, I appreciate all of you not going. I'm curious, the adult system uses, excuse me, United Way and a lot of nonprofits to get kids out, and we get a kind of a running list from what
Right.
judges are doing. Okay, well, does that have any place at all in what you're trying to do, or is that not working? Because this is actually, they're probably too young to be working for.
And we had talked about that, because I was very involved with that when I was with the adult
Right.
system. The hard part about that is places wanting to assume the liability of a kid.
Uh-huh.
They want an adult with them.
Oh, I see.
So this piece about using the two agencies that can offer an employee to go and do something meaningful for that child. So that it might not be, I'm going to volunteer to clean up the cages at the zoo, but it might be, I'm going to shadow a guy who's a plumber doing a plumbing internship, and I'm going to get some community service hours for that. Or somebody's going to partner with me to participate in a meaningful way in a nonprofit, and maybe that means they're going to volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club or whatever, but they have to be supervised.
Okay.
Can I chime in from a judge's perspective? I think with myself and Judge Kaler, I'll speak about us because we kind of came in at the same time,
Right.
and we've known each other for a while. Our challenge when we're thinking of, and I hate the word community service, it's a pro-social activity. And I'll ask the youth, do you understand, or what does that mean to you? And they'll give me a response, typically extracurricular activity, sports. And we'll take it a step further and we'll say, it's kind of like that, but I want you to make a difference in your community. I want you to go do something that you're going to benefit from, but the community is going to benefit. And it's more geared around age appropriateness, maybe trying to assess the maturity of that youth. And it can range from anything from going to read on Saturday mornings at the library to kids, which they have those opportunities available, to community gardens, working in that area, to go fill sack lunches for the homeless and needy. And you'll see, this is what I say, you'll see what old bread, a piece of cheese, a bottle of water, and a banged up apple means to somebody when you hand them that lunch. So I think from the court's perspective, United Way I'm used to. I'm familiar with it from being a prosecutor. It just doesn't seem to really benefit the kid, right? So I think from the community service perspective, you got to find something that both of those people are going to get something out of. The community being a party as well as this youth. So that's...
Well, I have to tell you too, and not because you're sitting here, but I have been blown away by the caliber of the people that the governor has been appointing to the juvenile bench. I'm just knocked out. It's just impressive, but I thank you for your attitudes, and you're bringing so much to the bench, and it's so needed, so I just want to say thanks.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
May I interject something here?
Sure.
I had a discussion about this the other night with my daughter and her son. My grandson's not too far over being a juvenile, but he's involved in the justice system in Lancaster County. We're talking probation and diversion. And he mentioned that he's just about out of time before he's transitioned to 21 and out of the system. But he has to complete community service. So I'm trying to find out from him, well, what are they talking to you about in terms of community service? Well, I don't know, but they're going to tell me. They're going to tell me what it's going to be. Now, I know my grandson. I've spent a hell of a lot of time with him over the years. He's very good at things like archery, hunting, but he also has special needs, and he could probably be of a big help to kids that have anxiety problems, special need problems, autism, etc. But nobody is interested. They all have their preformed opinions of what that kid is going to do. But you as a judge might send him to do something because if an advisor said so, that kid doesn't want it. They need to have the kid's input and around his talents, but also his interests. If you don't have that, it's like getting him ready for a job. Go find something to earn money that you like. Don't bounce from job to job at things that you don't want. That's just my opinion, but I was involved as a youngster in the system too.
I don't disagree, and I think half of that is the dialogue between the court and the minor that's in front of us of maybe they don't know what opportunities there are out there, so all I'm trying to do is drop nuggets of things out there that'll help.
I don't disagree with that. I'm only trying to say the court never asked me, and I was in the courtroom. The court never asked for me to give input because grandparents don't have a say in Nebraska. That's a problem.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But somebody from Philadelphia could come in, a retired Supreme Court judge, and guide these people in here how to devise an intervention system for Nebraska. But they don't want to listen to me or other people like me. Thank you.
I got one,
You want
just one
the
question.
judge?
The day reporting, Omaha Home for Boys, how does someone get into it? Do they need to contact Omaha Home for Boys, or is that something that's available for the community?
That's a good question. They're taking the probation kids. I don't know if they would take referrals from outside the community or not, but Daryl Howard is your contact there. And I can send you his number if you need it. Daryl?
Thank you.
I'll send it to you.
Judge, back on you.
So just real quick, the Concord, the victim offender mediation and those kind of services, the bench just we worked on some language of what to put in our order so it's consistent and we don't micromanage the services that are available. We just got that out last week, so we're simply referring probation shall make available a referral to Concord Mediation for the various restorative justice programs. That we kind of worked on. So again, we didn't want to micromanage. We didn't want to eliminate possible options that were there. So that should really start to hit our orders. There is a little bit of an issue with Concord Mediation in that the transition, this kind of carries over to 3A side, but I'll just give you background quickly.
You know, go with it.
The Eastern Service Area transition from Promise Ship to St. Francis. St. Francis had not had a conversation with Concord and assessed their value as a service provider. So Concord started going to try and find money to continue on their services. So on the crossover type kids, we were really trying to figure out how do we keep Concord in the loop and keep their service available to us. And when we're sending the orders out for these services, because Promise Ship is slowly transitioning out, those orders were sitting and not moving onward to Concord. So we had to really internally with the bench figure out, we got to keep them at the table. We've got to keep them, in the loop of when we're ordering services. So there's been a lot of behind the scenes and working with Concord in a positive way for that, which has kind of developed our relationship or strengthened it, if you will. The in-home services piece, interesting challenge. I'm going to throw out, there's been an individual that was involved in the ecological model at the beginning, Rich Pope, who is a phenomenal resource for us, and he's done some amazing things. Mr. Pope leaves, he goes out independent, and I will have young adults that come in front of me at the beginning of a case, and I instantly can tell these kids would benefit from the Rich Popes in the world. And how do I get them there? How do I have that available to say, I know this kid could be successful at home with the Rich Pope type services, but how do I order it? Who pays for it? Or I order it and then Mary calls me and says we have a problem with that order. So that in-home service piece, and that's something.
Was that a pre-adjudicated?
Yeah.
Then that's I think that's what we need to know, because that's the discussion I guess having with
Charles Drew.
Greg, to try to when this money starts flowing, that's where we have flexibility to go at.
Okay.
So if that's you need whatever you need to give us on that.
I mean, that helps us with the numbers of ultimately the youth center, because if I really have every resource available to me as a judge, I look at my numbers, the 7 kids detained on the most recent report. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that number couldn't be 0, occasionally 1. If I had that tool belt available to me.
And the court order is part of that key, because as we start to add additional services at the youth center, especially for those pre-adjudicated youth, the pathway is to allow a Charles Drew access, so we can start a process of figuring out case management for that individual. But the court orders would need to give us some flexibility so we can move the dial on some of these pre-adjudicated youth so they can start the services and in some cases even start the eval process, because if it looks like based off of whatever screening tool that's used, that a youth that may have come in under the influence, they're ultimately, once that youth finally gets adjudicated, there may be a need for an eval. But if we could get in front of that and get that information to the court for those pre-adjudicated youth, that would really expedite and change our length of stay for quite a few.
So I'm trying to. You sound like they may be merging in 2 different deals. What did you call it though before Mark went
The
to
pre-adjudicated services. I want to order something for this kid to stay at home. And
so it's not a particular thing there. This is just general pre-adjudicated
yeah,
service.
and I'll tell you, Mark, to answer your question, the concern that getting us the information is half of it, but you got to remember we're in kind of an adversarial battle in juvenile court. So it's really the defense attorney's got to walk in and say, hey, I'm okay with these evals being ordered. County attorney's got to sit at the table potentially and say, we're not going to use anything from the results of the eval in further prosecution.
Yeah, I think in Lancaster there's a degree of agreement that services where individuals may receive some form of therapeutic, because right now we're crisis intervention, and for those pre-adjudicated youth, they're going to be, that's a gap of time where services can be intertwined in their stay. And the question is, you know, what level of services can be available to assist that youth? And even in the juvenile court, the ultimate goal is what's best for the youth. And so I think there's some room where that conversation can occur. But the hope is that for those pre-adjudicated youth at the youth center, that there could be some way to move some services their way, and even to coordinate those services through case management after they leave.
Okay, clear, because I feel like I'm hearing two, because I feel like the Drew thing is separate.
Yeah,
with this.
it is two separate things.
Well,
Okay,
the-
so, just so, sit that there for a minute, and we'll come back. What you're saying though, which we always thought, there's the number Greg shows, there's somewhere between 11, 15 kids, that's county kids, pre-adjudicated kids. I'm just trying to get it, what's the number you think is needed pre-adjudicated service-wise?
That's the number of kids typically.
No, I mean like, what's the dollar number?
Oh, the
you think
dollar
that we
amount?
need?
I have no idea.
Is there a way to gauge that?
We could start, like, I'm sitting here thinking of how many, I don't know how we would.
There's like 9 kids. It just depends. So the whole key to all of this, though, is correctly identifying which kids need what, because the other piece that can't happen with respect to the bench is the judges have what they have when they come in, but there has to be an additional assessment or screening or some identification of what kids need. We can't be coming in and throwing services because of stuff we think.
What is that, a
So-
needs assessment? Or what
Yeah,
is it?
so there's a
needs,
number
or
of
is another thing?
risk
assessment.
needs, because the
Which
other
is not the one we're doing now.
right.
And we need another assessment.
Well, there's things that we could do that don't cost a lot of money that would help us get eyes on them more quickly.
Okay.
But the other, I think the thing people forget sometimes is the kids that are supposed to be in juvenile justice are kids who are a threat to community safety. So we don't want kids coming into juvenile justice who need services. Yes, they need services, but we don't want to be raising them up to the point where we have to wait for them to catch a charge, to quote the police, so they can get services. So all of these pieces we can do up front to correctly identify them in school, at a mental health services, in diversion, wherever, to keep them from coming here, is where the dollars should be going.
No, I
The
hear you.
immediate pre-adjudication, we're only talking 9 kids, so that's not a ton of money.
Yes, can you got in your head, can you outline the steps that need to be done with it? And what we
To
need to do?
identifying the money?
No,
The
I
services
I think like,
of what
it sounds like
it
you said there needs to be some form of assessment. And then, and the only question I got service-wise is, do we have the capacity out there
Yes.
to do that? Okay.
Yes.
I guess, can you just give us something to,
For
Go ahead.
perspective, it's not a lot of kids, but I can tell you in the third quarter, 7 were released that stayed a total of 349 days. And so if you can reduce that length of stay, it's not a lot of kids, but they tend to linger, and so how do you get in front of that?
okay? Can you give us something that we can look at?
To write up something
Yeah.
about what it will, yes.
Okay.
I just came from a meeting for the program and policy meeting with the county attorney, and I think it's something the county attorney's office is willing to look at,
Okay.
to circle back to the piece about not using that for prosecution,
Okay,
which would help.
Say, Chris,
yes, sir.
I wanna ask the judge, is the money, is there a component about needing more some money in all of this?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking about now.
Okay, well, I mean, I think, you know, I wanna see the county, in the next 2 days, start a discussion about where we ought to be spending our money. We get forced to do a lot of things, but there's a community spirit among the commissioners that we need to start doing a lot more things to try to preempt some of this. So I think, you know, as far as I'm concerned, we're gonna have to do what we have to do to get you the money and the resources to get these things straightened out. As much as, you know, you've got tremendous skill set at this table. And, you know, we've got an opportunity, I think, to make some changes. If you have the proper money, you can't be stalled by money. That's not right.
I don't know that it's money. I don't know that I'm the person to ask about money. Unfortunately, I order it, and I think money is probably more. Mary knows the dollars and cents. Service-wise is what I want more of. I want more services. I want more tools in my tool belt.
Up front.
Up front, yes. And I think Mary hit it on the head of saying, look, we should be working in a preemptive fashion. Because I'm at the tail end of this, right? They come in after.
But your point is that's why I'm kind of asking them to give an area, because with what the point that Mary said that I think the board needs to hear is, she said she got to have a conversation with the county attorney.
Yeah.
So the point is, the more we can understand this piece, the more the board can have these conversations with the county attorney when they come before the board. So I'm just saying, that's the piece I wanted, and that's why I wanted to try to make sure to see if we can get them here to have this dialogue, because once we're aware of it, some of those decisions in a lot of hands, and there's only a few people here that can push each other to make the deal. So that's why they're here.
You know what bothers me, and this is another naive question, I suppose, but I don't care. What I get concerned about, particularly when the truancy thing we were battling with all those huge numbers and everything else, you know, when I was mayor, I would ask directors, you know, hey, how's condemnation going? How many houses have you condemned, you know? Next guy is the rehab unit, you know, and I said, you better start talking to each other, because you're doing opposite things, and we want to rehab and save these, you know. So I guess what I'm saying is that my feeling is that when these children run into prosecutors, what the hell's their job? Prosecute. You know, so here we are, we've got them dealing with people who are, to their boss, you know, how's things going? You know, well, I got rid of about 18 kids and they're all gone down the river someplace. You know, we need a whole different bunch of people in there who, like the judge and others at this table, are expressing some way to pull these kids out of the river. You know, and what we need to do, you know, he said he needs more rich popes. I'm fascinated by that. You know, that's personally, I guess, like some kind of guy that's got his heart where it belongs. That's what I want more of. So for my money, I want to see us continue that direction, and to hell with these prosecutors. I'm sorry, we don't need prosecutors in this picture at all.
What?
To hell with them.
No, well, that's why he's here, so you can understand it. That's why I've asked him to come. You want to continue, Judge? I just want to make sure.
I think it's a system wide. We all have to sit at the table together and say, are we really doing juvenile justice?
Right.
And it may require us to examine 11-12 caused us to re-examine a lot of things and think differently. And we've seen some great movement to it. And I don't want to get in, because I worked for Mr. Klein. I respect him immensely.
Oh, yeah.
And how he handles his office is 100% him. I'll never talk about that. I can tell you, we would be willing to sit at the table, excuse me, and say, hey, can we rethink this? Can we redo how a courtroom looks and what services? I'll give you a snippet. The truancy you bring up is a whole other issue. For the first time in Ray Curtis, our administrator's involvement, we had 0 status filings in the month of October 2019.
Oh, that's amazing.
So there's something that's happening.
Yeah.
Now, I'm hoping I don't have double that number in November when I get our stats.
I hope you have 00.
So,
Can I just note, I just want to reiterate,
Okay.
you know, hopefully by changing the meeting date, and if Mary and these guys can come regular to some degree, the board members can gain enough intricacy here to ask the question when it comes before the board, because it had to be confrontational, but you just got to ask the question, why? And so it took 4 years to get this case processing meeting. They came before the board, and when we were able to go more than about 2 questions deep, then they started moving on it. So the board is in a position to ask the question to the players, and you got to understand this to do it.
Yeah, and I just want to say again, with the prosecutors, our juvenile court county attorneys are amazing, but money-wise, that is what we need, and it is for pre-adjudicated kids. Barry's right that there needs to be more prevention, but that 349 days is about 120,000 on 7 kids. How do we redirect that money for 7 kids and their families to be able to be in their home?
Yeah, no kidding.
And that's exactly why there's the reimagining juvenile justice. We're getting all of the system points and getting agencies together and figuring out what's working and what's not working, and how to work at a cross-system utilization approach, and how to actually have a positive youth development model. I mean, all of those things are incorporated, and, you know, we're doing our next reimagining juvenile justice.
Let me cut you off, Mark. I want to ask one question before he has to go to the detention hearing.
Okay.
This question I want to ask, so OB 1112 passed, took effect in July. My thought, I guess, give us your round figure on this, because my thought was it would take 3 to 6 months for that law to kind of make its way through. But when you see the numbers, at least the number I saw this morning from the other report, like 74 or something, so I'm assuming somewhere around there. I know there's been an increase in adult charges, and so I'm just trying to get you all's gauges on why it may still be hovering around there, what may be there. I mean, you got the adult charges, you got 2 judges not there. I'm just trying to get you all's feel on when some things may kick or why, or do we need to push something else to make the law more, not legislative wise, but see who may be pushing things along. Because my understanding always, if that piece wasn't moving, it was the public defender and the private defense piece that should be pushing. If a kid's sitting there and they shouldn't be sitting there. So I'm just trying to get you all's feel on, because there was a minute where it was down under 70 and it was going, then all of a sudden there was some spike in adult pieces. And I know the point that there's a lack of adult judges on the other end, and the conversation you and I had about being 9 months to make it through the adult side is probably longer for the lack of judges. So I'm just curious for you all feel for you go about LB 1112 working its way through. Why not? What's the need? Other stuff like that.
The younger kids coming on adult charges has been a lot. 13, 14-year-olds with guns. We've just seen a lot of those. To your point about who's minding the store, where are those pieces are complicated. They're kicked out of school, they need a greater level of supervision and prevention. But there are 35 today who are sitting there waiting on adult charges. We just had a kid sit there for a whole entire year, and his case just got transferred. So those kinds of pieces are the conversations we're having with the adult county attorney's office that has been challenging. We're certainly trying our best when the kids come in that are that don't belong there. We haven't put them there. We found other places for them.
Okay, good.
I don't know that I have an answer to that because we're short 2 judges and it's really chaotic. I think we try to do a really good job of communicating. For example, I have 2 detentions that are coming in that are Judge Kaler's cases. My first thing when I got my list was to go down to Judge Kaler's courtroom and say, in the event these 2 are detained, get me a hearing. And our response typically to each other is, I want to see these kids back in 7 days rather than the 21 that is case or the case progression number. So we're communicating more. We're trying, but we're also really limited with 2 open dockets that have been farmed out.
Okay.
And so I don't know. I don't feel like it's a fair assessment given that shortage.
So I just want me. So if I answer to it, the lack of judges play a part, and you need to really be at full strength to let it go.
I think that is going to help immensely because it'll free up our calendar where we can start bringing them back. The more touches on these kids to say, how are we doing? Have we identified a juvenile detention alternative? Is there something in the community? Has a kinship family member stepped up willing to work with this kid with the safety plan in place? Is the safety plan approved? I mean, there's a million different options, but if I don't have the time to see that kid more frequently, that's a problem. And I don't know how it's affecting other judges' calendars.
Okay.
Right? I only know mine.
Okay.
So
That's fine. So the judge got to go to the detention hearings, but he, like I mentioned, trying to change the date. So if things go accordingly next year, he'll get the dates early, and hopefully he'll be a regular visit so we can have this discussion on this. So appreciate it, Judge.
Thank you for coming, Judge.
You got anything else you want to add?
I don't.
Okay. So with that, item 3 under DCYC, let me just set the stage for this particular topic, because Brad and those guys will usually give the reports they usually give, and because of how the board meetings are flowed with them presenting, they've been repetitive to some degree. So to get something new into the meeting and go deeper, I asked them to have this discussion about room restriction because in October, Lathrop had the meeting. You went to the meeting?
Yeah.
The meeting wasn't unusual in some extent, but knowing the people that were in the room and things that came up, room restriction came up. And I had the conversation with, just a few people, because every time it comes up, we give the answer in respects to security and some other things, but this keeps coming up. And it's going to, my gut is it's going to be something. Because Lathrop just talked about juvenile issues in general. This is going to play its way up somewhere. I don't know who's going to do it. But I just want you all to come explain this, because I'm not comfortable with the answers that we're given in some degree, and it feels like we should be able to solve this, and we're always getting picked out on this room restriction thing. So that's the stage. You all can go into it
So
however
the
you want
meeting
to.
was at
explain.
Metro Community College, was that the one?
Yeah, that was the one that I emailed you all about and
Right,
said,
so there were five,
yeah, WOW's here, it's gonna be something on it.
there were five young people that came and testified. And Rondi did some legwork. Four of the five never, ever stepped foot in the Douglas County Center, ever.
Yeah.
They came from out of state to Boys Town. Wow. One of them, the girl, had been with us, I think it was 2 years prior.
Yeah.
Not 2 years. She was with us 2 years prior for just a short amount of time, and she spent less than 2 days in restrictive housing while she was at the Douglas County Youth Center. So I wish, that they would actually come talk to us, or literally come see what we do. I testified in 2018 regarding this bill. And one of the things I know that was bothering me when this conversation started up was that, to me, just to be completely honest, it felt like a marketing plan, and they kept referring to it as solitary confinement.
Yeah.
Solitary confinement. And for us in our world, we despise that term. Just on a personal note, my mom had visited the Douglas County Youth Center one time, and this was before we had closed Unit 8, the restrictive housing unit, which has been closed since 2011. And she literally started crying when she saw those kids in those rooms. So I am passionate about this issue. I mean, this issue means a lot to me. We've had that unit closed since 2011, maybe into 2012, but 7 or 8 years that unit has been closed. So when I testified, it was really important to me to convey to the senators, and I didn't take a position. You guys know that I had. But I wanted them to understand what it is we do with these kids while they're in restrictive housing. It's not a room off in the middle of nowhere with a hole in the floor. These are the kids. This guy here, that's his group. The kids that are in that kind of trouble. He is amazing, and the stuff that he does with them. But I did bring John Mack. He works a lot with the kids on restrictive housing. Dave Collins, he is our principal. Y'all know Mark, and Rondi's our detention manager over there.
So, walk me through the process. What would be something that kicks off a kid going into restrictive housing, and what would they?
So all of our kids have shown some ability to not behave well, right? And a good number of them have shown some ability not to behave well at other placements. So they come to us, and so they've come to us because they have fought. They have been extremely disruptive. For whatever reason, the other place hasn't been able to hold them. So when they walk in our door, we don't expect that their behaviors are going to immediately change. It's our job to manage that behavior and to encourage them to do better. So when something does happen, our staff are trained in de-escalation techniques. And so they work with them, they try to de-escalate the situation. If need be, a supervisor might come to assist them. Rondi might come. There's a variety of people that might show up to assist. Over 90% of the situations that we have at the Douglas County Youth Center are done within an hour. Over with. And that includes fighting.
They're what? I'm sorry.
They're over with. The situation is resolved and done within an hour.
Okay.
And that includes mutual fights. You remember the schoolyard fights. It's a lot of times you shook hands and you called it a day pretty quickly. He's been able to do that with these kids. We've got, go ahead, Mike.
So are those kids brought to your facility that have been in a fist fight at Bryan High or something?
Oh, they've had altercations at other placements, sure.
But I mean, do they end up in your facility or
For a
someplace else?
fist fight at Bryan High, I wouldn't think so.
No, I
Big-
mean, whatever school, I'm just
No,
saying.
not school. They've
No.
been at a placement.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
already court involved.
I couldn't hear exactly what you said. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's
You
all right.
just speak this way. So immediately when something happens, we're lucky. I mean, when we start looking around at other places, we're really lucky to have the LMHPs and the mental health services. We wish we had more, to be honest with you, but we're lucky to have what we do have. They get involved immediately, and I didn't bring nearly enough copies, but they start working with the kids right away, and it's a youth-centered de-escalation and safety plan. And our whole purpose when these kids are in situations and they need to be separated from other kids for a minute is to get them to a point where everyone is safe. And that's another thing I said back in 2018, because they wanted us, I mean, I think that the driver was to not have a kid in the room longer than an hour. And so when you think about that, you're trying to keep, in some instances, I mean, the reality is in some instances, bullies. You're trying to keep the bullies out of the room. And so Rondi brought this up to me. He said, what's going to happen is we're going to get the bullies out of the room in an hour, and exactly what they don't want to see happen is someone else is going to go walk into their room and shut the door. And they're going to do that because they're scared, because we just let this person out before the situation is completely resolved. And that was absolutely something that needed to be considered and brought up.
So Brad, let me pin you right there. So kid has an altercation.
Mm-hmm.
You start working through the situation. If a kid will get put on room restriction for something as a cool down,
Sometimes, yeah.
or because of a health matter.
Never because of
No health matter.
No.
As of I don't know what, general danger or something.
The only kids that we have in their rooms are the kids that are a danger to other kids at that point in time.
And that
we've gotten to
danger-
the point where they literally, I mean, Rondi's got carte blanche to let them out at the earliest possible moment.
So that danger would be, I guess, if you had some altercation and you need to get some stuff back in order, they need to be there for a period of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so when they're there, the thing they would say too is like, I guess, how often are eyes on them when they're
All
in
the time.
there? Okay, so somebody's watching them while
They
they're
don't,
in there.
see, that's
They
the
don't-
thing
they
that
don't
gets missed.
leave.
Yeah, it's like they get placed in, they go to their bedroom, in a sense. I mean, yeah,
Okay,
it's-
so I guess while we're there, before you go, what do we need to be more offensive? Because every time this come up, we get beat up on it, and I
Send
feel
them
like
our
I
way,
can.
seriously. Send
No,
them
I
our
mean
way.
from an end of, can we write up some process that describes how we do this to do it? Because what I don't want to keep doing is having like an ACLU do a report and they do something, we have to respond. I'd rather say this is our process and be more proactive and put it there. And then if that inquires them to ask, then we can bring them in. But right now, we're totally reacting to it.
You know, one of
And
the
that's what I'm
problems-
trying to do.
One of the problems, Chris, is that I'm not gonna say all of them, but there are some that simply have the agenda of ending room confinement. So there's nothing that you're gonna say to them.
Correct.
I mean, they can come visit the facility, they're still gonna go down to the legislature and testify and say bad things about the youth center and say that you just need to end room confinement completely, which in our situation is not realistic.
That's fine.
You can't have
But
that.
I know, but that's just like, we got other matters that people got an agenda with. At least I feel like I can answer it. But right now, I feel like we are always on the defensive with it.
Right, we are, because, and we answer, I think that, the youth center does a good job of answering, it's just that some people don't wanna listen. They don't wanna hear what we have to say because they have their minds made up that they wanna do it this way. We have to just keep hammering it, like you said, we have to be on the offensive.
But I haven't heard us hammering it.
Well,
I always hear it respond to after the ACLU report in the paper after WOW. Mike?
I'm curious, something I thought about, that, what size is the room that these children go into, and this has this door on it? What size do you think it is?
The square footage of the room,
Yeah.
it's, you gotta realize that, okay, since now we've been doing PREA for the last 2 years, I'm the PREA coordinator, we have a 12-bed unit, and we can't have more than 8 kids on the unit, so there's never more than 8 kids in the unit.
Give the PREA acronym for somebody who don't know.
Oh, it's the Prison Rape Elimination Act, so it's passed by the federal government back in 2003 for sexual safety of, juveniles and even adults too, in adult prisons. So anyway, you have the units, it's got 12 rooms in it, all the kids in the same room unit. If they have an altercation with each other, we will separate the kids and then we will send them to their room. But it's their room. If they've been living in this unit, they might have been in there 2 months before they had an altercation. We put them in the unit, write reports on everything, the supervisor comes down and talks to the kids, talks to the staff, tries to find out what happened. And even before we even go into a hearing process, the supervisor will come down and try to get these, even this fight just happened, and we'll try to get these 2 kids, you know, see what happened, see what went on in the background, and then he usually takes the process from there.
Well, this probably wouldn't work at all, but my question is, you know, I mean, the thing is that, and I'm a card-carrying member of the ACLU, in case you didn't suspect that already. And won some great bets, too, so it's great. Anyhow, but what I'm wondering is, you know, when you see this young person in a small room, I mean, that just bang, the flag goes up, this is solitary confinement, and, you know, he's got a window this big in the door, I don't know, I haven't seen it, I'll have to come down and get a good look. But I just wonder, something as ridiculous as, you don't wanna do this, because it probably rewards the child, but, you know, a big room, maybe twice the size, maybe even have a couch in there, I mean, make it something that's halfway livable, you know, I know the cells are okay and they're livable and stuff, but I'm just saying that, so when the ACLU guy or woman comes in and looks at it, they're not in this room that's about, you can get about 4 of them off this table, you know, that's not gonna work. I mean, if you have a nice room and a TV and all that kind of crazy stuff, of course you can't, because that'll just encourage the kid who's in the small room to behave, so then he gets the big room with the TV, I get that. I get it real well. So anyway, I don't know, but I just wonder if you can't short circuit these things by doing something that, you know, doesn't, it really takes away the vision of this child being punished in this small room, and, you know, I need to come by and
A
look at it.
big part also is the recognition that if a youth was at home and they got into a fight or got suspended, they would typically go in their room.
Sure.
I mean, parents that say, okay, your time out, you go in your room, you're gonna be there for X amount of time. Only different, and that's pretty much what we equate to. The youth is in their room. Now, we don't have a TV in their room,
Right.
but they can literally see out
Is the door
and see the
closed?
TV.
The door
The
closed?
door is closed. They still get educational opportunity. Our principal can attest that, you know, we still send them information. They still have opportunity to see a nurse or a doctor or
What
a
if-
psychiatrist.
What if you left the door open?
Then we probably wouldn't have them in restricted housing, to be
No.
honest with you. If we were comfortable doing that, they wouldn't even be in restricted
No,
housing.
I guess, I just, I'm sorry to
only-
be so naive, but I.
No, the only reason they're in there at that moment and the door is shut is because we're concerned about someone else's safety, and that is the only reason.
So let me ask you this, so okay, they're in there and there's always eyes on them. So the kid gets put into room restriction, there's somebody watching them. There's not like somebody walked away in
No.
30 minutes, they come back, okay. So then at that point, you make the determination whenever they come out based on the circumstances?
What will take place in general is based on going to interview both groups of kids,
Yeah.
what took place, you know.
And that kid could be in restrictive housing while that's going on?
Because it
Okay.
could be a mutual fight, let's just
Okay.
say it's a mutual fight, there's still, you know, you
Okay.
gotta remember, this, a lot of times these are gang-involved
Okay.
kids. And these are gang situations that, you know, just jumped off sporadically, they're in a fight, this isn't over with. You know, it might have been a situation where someone on the street got shot,
Mm-hmm.
and they find out about it inside, and 3 kids tried to kill the kid who's
Right.
from the opposite gang.
Okay.
And they jumped this kid and they hurt him, and he's really hurt real bad. We rushing him to the emergency room or whatever takes place. These things end up being real serious.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to keep these kids separate,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we have to make sure that everyone's safe. So in those situations, a lot of time, you know, we have to figure out how are we gonna get you back out? How are we gonna get you to de-escalate with this kid and with, you know, with these 2 groups? And how are we gonna come to a conclusion that you guys are gonna be safe together?
So just like the Sally Port situation that happened when that cop slammed the kid way back.
Yeah.
Are there other cameras like that around the areas in there?
In the day rooms.
Yeah, in the day rooms.
So, but for those rooms particularly where there's the room restriction, is there not?
No.
Is there a reason why there's not?
Because it's their normal room, so we
Yeah,
can't
they're
video.
undressing, they're using the restroom, so we can't.
Yeah. They're not taken anywhere else. It's in the room that they live
Right,
in.
it's a regular room.
It's their regular room. We don't take them to a separate
Okay.
room. We don't move them. It's the room that they're already sleeping in. It's the room they're in
They're
all the
literally told,
time.
go to your room.
They just go to their room. That's where they're at.
Okay, so that's good to know because when I hear this outside, I get the impression like it is an adult, like Mark and those
No.
guys have that area where they put like, you know,
No.
Terry Barfield and those guys in
Yeah.
when they were here. So it's not that.
No.
Okay, so this is my whole point to it. Is there some way that we can, help me work through this, give us some options, because every time we're out here on it, I just feel like we have no moral ground to stand on. And so just give us some offense to some degree, because when those kids were saying that, I didn't know, but I couldn't go through a process of saying that. So if there's some way to give,
That made me mad, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because they're sitting in a room in Omaha, Nebraska. Like you, everybody else is going to assume that all 5 of those came right out of the Douglas County Youth Center. All of their stories were reflective of their experience in the Douglas County Youth Center.
right,
And I, to some extent, think that was by design.
okay.
That's I think the frustrating part with some of the things that are happening when you talk about people coming in with an agenda. We all benefit from hearing stories from children and families' lived experience, absolutely. We hear that and we try and do better. But I think we have the same experience in probation when they talk about, well, when I was on probation, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, when were you on probation? 2002. Okay, well, things have changed since then, and here's how we do things now. So it's also frustrating from our end because I can't tell you the individual story about that child. We have confidentiality issues, records are sealed, so I say the same thing, is bring that family or that complainer to me so I can one-on-one clear that up, but I can't say that in a room full of people who are trying to make a point. And a lot of it's frustrating too because sometimes the point is at the expense of the privacy of those children.
So let's do this. Next week, I was gonna ask you not to do the report. I was gonna push it back.
Okay with that, Chris.
Well, I was gonna push it back to the, no, I'm gonna push it back to the 10th.
Okay.
Because
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, just so it's in the middle of enough point where it's after that, but at the end of the year. But I would say if everybody's fine with this, the regular handout report you would do, I would just kind of give out, the board has seen that where they should be able to work their way through it. I mean, you're giving it for some months now, they should be able to work their way through it. I'd be prepared to specifically do this, because I'd like to, it'll be December, it'll be for the legislative session, hopefully Burbach picks up on it, but we have that discussion out there in public about what it is, why it is, and we can ask these questions about how it's perceived, what it's
Similar to
heard,
what we
yeah,
just- yep,
and you can, because.
Yeah, we have nothing to hide. We're
And
fine.
then hopefully that spurs somebody to ask a little bit to it to explain this deal. You all fine with that?
Yep.
You all fine with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Here,
Okay.
if I could say,
I have just a couple, I have more things, I'm sorry, and I'm really sorry for asking a very stupid question, but I'm just thinking, I apologize for that, I'm the expert's doing the right thing. Anyway, what I'd like to do is, Brad, I'd like to ask you, just between the two of me, nobody else has to approve or say you can't do that. I'd like you to write a letter that I will sign as you submit it to me about those kids testifying to what happened in other counties. That's really important that Steve and the other senators know that. I would like to ask you, I am asking you now, to write a letter to Senator Lathrop, and we'll copy the other senators, and I will sign it. And so just for your information, you need to know, because that's just outrageous. I had no idea. You know what I took away from that meeting? That Boys Town is just doing a hell of a good job.
they,
Well, I mean, that's what I took away. Is this family loving this whole thing, and I thought, God, are we on the wrong track totally? I mean, Boys Town's just hubbing around these 7 or 8 kids in these cottages, and here we are doing all this other stuff and putting them in a building across the street, But that's what I took away from it. And I'm really insulted that those little shits would do that to me, to tell you the truth. The other deal, you know what I'm haunted by is when, and I kind of think of it as, who's the fellow that comes down and makes the presentation on who, it's real small print, and who's where, and goes where? Greg.
The print's gotten bigger.
All right, well, anyway, don't tell him, I forgot his name, but I remember, anyway, so Greg comes down and does this stuff, and I take those and I look at him, oh, what the hell, And I'm thinking to myself, this is another simple question, a simple approach that I just gave you on let's put them in a bigger room approach, was what I look at is how these young people with their offenses, where do they fit in this new program that we're trying to do with all these, these kids are not Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, I mean, they're using guns, just recently, my God, there was a hell of bunch of carjackings and kids shooting at people and, oh my God, what's going on? And guns and stuff, and I'm thinking, how do they, what are these new programs all about? How are those kids going to fit into that? Because they're just, it's
No,
too
no,
wild.
your point. So if you're saying that, my hope is, we bring Greg into this meeting, and so hopefully you can have some cross talk with Mary and what they have, so you can see how it ties together. If you're fine with that.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is where I'd rather dig it in deep,
Sure.
because that's the point I made the last meetings of the board. You got the 20 to 30 that are on adult charges, the probably 10 to 15 that are on pre-adjudicated, 2 or so may be fed holds or other stuff, and then you got the probation pieces, and the one that everybody's trying to target, and I'm assuming reading those, the plan from the case processing committee, they're targeting this. Everybody's targeting these pre-adjudicated kids, so I'd rather bring Greg in here, so you hear this exchange, and you can know where that target is, because those are the kids that the state's paying for the probation kids, the ones that, where you ask where the Sherwood money hasn't come down yet,
Yeah.
but that's the number we need to get a grip on, because I'm assuming that's the kids that money was used to pay for, those pre-adjudicated kids that don't have a source, and that's what we need to get a grip on.
Okay.
So, and the judge can tie that together, we'll be ready to go. They hopefully they'll be at full strength here by the end of the year.
The last thing I want to do is plant a seed to ask everybody here about their facilities, whether they're suitable or not, and what we can do to make it better, because it's not a good thing if you're working in crummy office space, where things don't work and the bathroom's out of order and all that kind of crap. I like to know that, because we need to upgrade some of these facilities, I think. I know, and so that's not my committee, I don't really care, but we need to start, I think, look at some of these facilities, make sure that you're in places that are pleasant when these kids come in and pleasant when you go to work.
Okay.
Could I ask one question? Sorry,
Yeah.
just, I wanted to understand, so a youth to be released from room restriction, staff interview, and when they feel they're de-escalated to the point, then it's just,
done.
they're done. It's not a
It won't be the staff.
assessment, it's not
The
a,
staff will make a recommendation, but it's literally a phone call, the supervisor comes down, hopefully there's an LMHP available too.
But a lot of times it's based on our personal relationship with kids. All
That's
my
what it all
best
boils down to right
supervisors that we have in the facility, we all have personal relationships.
can you tell me like what the average length is just in general?
14 hours.
14 hours?
And that doesn't include the 90% of, that we deal with that are, they're less than 1 hour. That's only those that are over 1 hour. We have to
1 hour.
report to the state, everybody that's in their room for more than 1 hour, and for those, the average is 14 hours. And 65% of those that are in their room for more than 1 hour are because they assaulted someone.
Sorry, I
fight.
didn't pass the reports along to the
So,
commissioners.
in intent, all that question, I'll be prepared to explain the process, how a kid goes, and all that average length of stay stuff, because the dialogue will come.
We reduced our length, sorry.
What?
Very quickly, tomorrow at 11:30, you're having parent orientation.
Not tomorrow.
Okay, good, because I have a conflict.
Shelley,
Maybe it's
the
Thursday.
17th, be prepared for
You
the
gotta
data
report to
memo,
this probation officer.
Yes.
December. And just to the board, just follow up for you, I went to it, Patrick ended up going too. We went to that St. Francis presentation.
Oh, yeah,
I did ask them the question. I'm trying to work out a date for them to come.
good.
I'm gonna try to get them on the 17th.
Great.
If not, then
I
it'll
asked Chris to
carry
bring
over
Francis
to.
in to talk to us.
Now, their presentation was on, the family first stuff.
Yeah.
I was just telling them to be prepared to answer stuff in general about transition, so, and that, so, trying to work that date through.
Thanks.
All right, we're good, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.